The first time I ever laid eyes on Rebecca Langford, she was stepping out of a pearl-white electric Jaguar, the kind you don't just drive, you announce your arrival in. Downtown Chicago's financial district was waking up sunlight bouncing off glass towers, and there she was. Heels clicking on the marble steps, like each tap was a reminder she owned the place. Rebecca wasn't just the CEO of Norcom Industries, she was the youngest in the company's history. 35 years old, Wharton-educated, dressed like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Her office sat on the 40th floor, overlooking a skyline most people could only dream of. And if you were anyone in that building, you knew she was untouchable. To her, people like me, maintenance janitorial were background noise. The folks who made the coffee machine work, who kept the lights on, who swept the floors after her gala dinners. We didn't exist in her meetings, not unless something broke. And even then, we were invisible the moment the problem was fixed. That Monday morning, she breezed through the lobby without noticing I was standing 10 feet away, waiting for the service elevator. She had her assistant rattling off her schedule board meeting at 10 lunch with some senator at noon, an investor call at 3. Me, I had a wrench in my hand and a problem in the basement that had my stomach in knots. 3 days earlier, I'd run a routine check on the ventilation intake system down in sublevel 2. What I found wasn't routine at all. Carbon monoxide and hydrogen sulfide levels creeping higher than I'd ever seen. I double-checked the readings, then checked them again. Same result. One busted exhaust fan had been limping along for months, maybe longer, and every delay in repairs, every we'll get to it next quarter, was turning that basement into a slow-brewing death trap. I filed the report like protocol said. Sent it to facilities management, marked it urgent. Heard nothing. Tried again the next day, still nothing. The third time, the response was a polite version of stay in your lane. That's when I realized the system wasn't broken. It was designed to make sure voices like mine never made it upstairs. The next day was the quarterly employee recognition ceremony. Rebecca stood up on stage, all confidence and perfect posture, handing out glass trophies to middle managers and engineers while I was in the back, wiping down rows of chairs. She glanced at me once, maybe twice, but I could tell she didn't see me, just the uniform, the guy with a mop. I wanted to tell her right then to shout over the applause, but I knew how it would go. She'd smile, nod, and send me back through proper channels, the same black hole my warnings had already disappeared into. So I kept my head down. Until the next afternoon when the alarm started screaming. I was in the service corridor when I heard it, sharp, continuous, the kind of alarm that doesn't stop until somebody finds the source or a lot of people get hurt. My radio exploded with chatter evacuation orders for floors 35 through 40, chemical sensors tripped. My stomach dropped. This was it. Outside executives clustered together like a flock of expensive birds muttering about overreactions and false alarms. Rebecca stood in the middle, phone in hand, already annoyed at the disruption. I walked straight toward her. "Ms. Langford," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm Marcus Ellis, Maintenance. We need to talk about that gas leak they're investigating." Her eyebrows lifted like I'd stepped out of line. "Mr. Ellis, our emergency team is handling it. If you have concerns, go through your supervisor." With respect, I told her I've been trying for 3 days. I've got readings that prove what's happening up there is dangerous. Lethal dangerous. Her lips tightened. "We have qualified engineers who didn't catch this." I cut in, pulling out my notebook. Carbon monoxide and hydrogen sulfide building for days. That broken exhaust fan in the basement. It's been on the repair list since February. Yesterday's ventilation test pushed the contaminated air right into the executive floors. For the first time, she stopped, looked at the numbers, the timestamps, the sketches of the airflow system I'd memorized over years of working here. She didn't say it, but I saw it in her eyes, realizing that her own budget cuts had set the stage for this. Minutes later, Hazmat confirmed everything. If we hadn't evacuated when we did, people would have been dead by the end of the day. That night, while she was in some temporary command room surrounded by insurance lawyers and PR reps, I was still in the building walking emergency crews through ventilation maps I'd drawn myself. I knew that building like I knew the lines in my own hands. How winter air shifted through the ducts differently than summer, how one stuck damper on the 17th floor could choke airflow 3 stories above. The inspectors weren't just listening, they were following my lead. The next morning, Rebecca showed up in the facility's trailer, not her glass tower. She stood in the doorway for a minute watching me trace airflow paths on a blueprint. When the others stepped outside, she said quietly, "I owe you an apology. Ms. Langford, I told her it's not about me. It's about the fact that knowledge exists at every level, but it only matters if somebody's willing to listen." She asked me to walk her through what else she didn't know about her own building. I didn't hold back. Failing insulation in chemical storage rooms. Temperatures 15 degrees above safe limits. Repairs postponed so often they'd become permanent line items. She looked at the photos, the logs, the ignored reports, and I could see it hitting her how close we'd come, how many other disasters were just waiting their turn. Then came the board meeting. 11 people in suits worth more than my truck, all focused on one thing: how to keep the government contract and keep the shareholders happy. They talked about the leak like it was a hiccup, an equipment failure they could spin away. Rebecca pushed back. She said my name in that room, told them I'd saved lives, laid out the problems I'd shown her. The air went cold. They accused her of being emotional, of letting a janitor influence corporate strategy. That word janitor hung there like it was supposed to put me back in my place. She could have backed down, could have smoothed it over and kept her seat at the table. Instead, she doubled down, telling them their definition of leadership was the problem. You could see in their faces they were already plotting her replacement. At the shareholders' meeting, she went off script again. Standing in front of 200 of the city's most powerful investors, she put my photographs on the big screen: rusted valves, corroded pipes, safety violations they'd never seen because no one wanted to admit they existed. She told them exactly what had happened, why it had happened, and who had tried to stop it. Her own family tried to shut her down. One shareholder stood up, called it a breakdown. She looked him dead in the eye and said, "There's nothing routine about risking hundreds of lives to protect quarterly earnings." The fallout was ugly. They threatened her job, called her naive, accused her of betraying the people who'd made her. But she never walked it back. Not once. 6 months later, I stood beside her on the stage of the old West Side textile factory, now transformed into the Worker Safety Institute. She'd fought to create it: training programs, certifications, direct safety reporting lines to the top. My new title: Director of Operational Safety and Community Engagement. Fancy words for making sure no one in that company ever had to beg to be heard again. She spoke that day about what she'd learned not from Harvard case studies or corporate retreats, but from a guy in coveralls with a wrench in his back pocket. About how leadership wasn't about who sat at the head of the table, but who was willing to listen when the person mopping the floor said something was wrong. And I'll tell you this, standing there in front of that crowd, seeing the mix of hard hats and business suits, knowing that for once they were all hearing the same truth, I believed her. Now, whether you believe someone like Rebecca was right to go against her own board, or whether you think she blew up her career for nothing, that's on you. But I've got to ask, how many disasters have you seen brewing because the people in charge wouldn't listen to the ones doing the work? And what would you have done if you were in her shoes? Drop your thoughts below. I'm ready to read every one.